Hey everybody, this is Mike Honeycutt, Marketing Corero Network Security, here again with the always dapper Raj Vadi, Senior Solutions Architect at Corero. Raj, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you too, Mike, and thank you all for joining this session. This would be the third in the series, and I hope that we'll be able to kind of throw some light on monetization, which I think is kind of important in a service provider environment.
Well, you nailed it on the head. So the title is From Cost Center to Profit Center, right? So turning what would be a sunk cost into a way that providers could make money. And on that note, so in the past two episodes, we've talked about ideal solutions and what a multi-tenant solution would look like. And today we want to talk about where we're going in the space and what we believe to be a good solution moving forward to help foster that idea of making money off of the solution. So I'll let you kind of dive into it, Raj, around this application security solution. What do we mean by being able to monetize a solution? And maybe you can dive into, beginning to why we see this opportunity is why it's a good opportunity right now.
Yeah, so looking at the security scape, Mike, it's pretty clear that a lot of the attacks are moving into the application side. In fact, this was the premise of our initial couple of episodes. Now,
Mhm.
these things are not limited to targeting only enterprises and things like that. Quite a lot of times, the O&M services of the service provider themselves come under attack, whether they be the self-service portals or other kind of things. Now, in general, if you were to take an analog of our network DDoS days, I believe the service providers started about investing in DDoS technology primarily to protect their infrastructure and networks.
Mhm.
At the same time, having this capacity and also kind of being in this whole cloud world, you do want to leverage those resources for
Yeah.
monetization opportunities by reselling those kind of services or crafting services that will benefit the tenants as well as the service providers. But more importantly, once you benefit the tenants, now you have a monetization plan because this is an added service. Now, on a similar analog, we're looking at being able to mitigate these application layer threats. This could vary from obviously from a Corero perspective, we're going to target both kind of DDoS sort of things at the application layer. This is within the encrypted stream of traffic,
Mhm.
right? And also, application layer threats that are deeper, such as the OWASP top 10 and other types of intrusions and injections. We do have a couple of different systems. They're all still tied into what we call as core. And the idea here is to not only provide protection for the service providers, but to help them take that system and roll it out as a multi-tenant service that they can then monetize.
Yeah, I mean, it's a true differentiator, right? I mean, to be able to give providers something else that they can sell. Um, but why now? Like, why do we see this as an opportunity now, though?
So one of the reasons I think, if you look at the service provider, it's moving beyond just simply providing connectivity, right? The DDoS kind
Mhm.
of enhanced that connectivity service by providing a value add.
Mhm.
And when you start looking at application security, certainly you can go through cloud services, etc. But from a service provider perspective, what is it that you gain from that business, right?
Mhm.
Generally, it involves kind of reselling. And by the way, talking about these cloud security services, let's not forget what happened just a couple of days ago with
Oh
Cloudflare,
yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So I think a lot of enterprises and the tenants for these service providers are looking for something closer to them, also something that allows them to retain control of that system, right? So there will be a split responsibility. There will be some parts that's basically how we described our distributed application protection solution, right? There would be a distributed responsibility between the service provider and then full control and more granular approach for the tenant. But mainly I think why now, is simply because of, it benefits the service providers to provide that distinction and differentiation. Two, it brings it closer to for the enterprises, and they retain greater control than these massive cloud providers and things like that. And monetization wise, this is something that service providers can directly monetize.
Thank you for outlining that. Can we talk about sort of the complexity? I mean, because the first thing that somebody's going to say is, okay, well, it's another service overhead, right? So talk about it from the provider side, and then again to the tenant, right? What are we offloading, right, by providing this solution?
So I think, first and foremost, we did set the stage with our initial, episodes in terms of how the ideal solution should be built. And we have taken these guiding principles and built, or in the process of building this particular solution that, number one is targeted towards a low operational cost. What does that mean? What that means is the traditional solutions that you have today have a lot of operational cost in terms of rule maintenance, in terms of false positive handling, and also they become very intrusive. And generally, service providers, other than maybe trying to protect their infrastructure, do not try to monetize or try to pitch it as a service to their end users or tenants. So we have taken all these pain points and we have built this solution that is, number one, easy to operate, right? The primary task is easy to operate, very clear in its goals in terms of how a policy or a security policy is handled. You could have split security policy management in terms of they could be high level security policies that the service provider would like to put in place to protect their infrastructure and also to protect some of the basic tenant application security requirement, meet some of the application security requirements. But the tenants can have a more granular security policies that they control, manage, and handle, right?
And wouldn't you say that's truly innovative in this space, though? Wouldn't you say?
I would think so, because I am not aware of other off-the-shelf solutions that are, built in that particular manner, designed in that manner. Because most of the solutions that are available today originally started off as solutions designed for the enterprise and not the service provider. The second part of this is, given the fact that obviously putting too many eggs in one basket is not a great idea. This is a very distributed system, not only distributed within that particular security provider's POP, but across their POPs, across the geography, and can tolerate a variety of failures along with the capability to scale, so that maybe one of the sites or one of the applications, something is going on, there's an increase in traffic, we can scale the protection for that. So all of this is automated and orchestrated. So again, I think the key point here is, other than high level directives or guidelines that are sought from the service provider, quite a few of these are automated. Provisioning is automated via Terraform scripts. There's discovery of the applications and other things. So the system itself carries out quite a lot of the operational tasks. This is, I think, the key for service providers, because they operate in a very lean manner. Obviously, from a business perspective, the margins are low, so you don't want to invest a lot of money in something with the hope that if you build it, they will come. Rather, something that allows you to grow along with your customer growth.
Yeah, I agree. It's great points. I mean, and so you touched on, the security incident that happened earlier this week, right? Obviously, this allows providers to stand out, differentiate, monetize, right? But how is it different from, just tapping into a solution that like Cloudflare, like you named, and then actually having a solution like this? And then, what are the benefits, the pros to going this route?
Yeah, so one of the clear advantages, right? If you look at the path of traffic, if you're a service provider and you offer this application security, it is much more closer to your tenant. So essentially, it's kind of like the last mile, right? rather than something in the cloud that is dependent on the DNS that you host, has to steer into this cloud provider's space, go through their particular system, and then head back to through the service provider back to your to the tenant space. Obviously adds latency, but more importantly, dependence on some of these kind of things. The kind of in the cloud services, number one, as the incident that you referred to, like obviously things can break. There is no such thing as being able to depend on a single service, right? But the way we are designing our system also happens to have dynamic DNS. And what does that mean? What it means is, should something happen, even from a service provider perspective, they can steer this away to the customer's on-premise, instance of this security appliance, right? And so this is really a true hybrid stuff. So if there is some issue in the infrastructure or whatever it is, number one, you would be able to steer it away to the tenant on-premise instance, right? So it gives you that resilience.
Yes.
And this I think it has floated up to the top. Nobody can say it's theoretical possibility. It has happened. Beyond that, from the service provider perspective, obviously, to them, rather than resell something like a Cloudflare or whatever stuff, right? It is, you can build, and your margin in terms of monetizing this particular kind of service is more, and more importantly, you can offer a tiered service. So maybe you have a very basic protection level, right? For a majority of the tenants that may want to subscribe because they need a checkbox for some basic security. You can take it to the next level, which is more advanced stuff, but on a shared infrastructure within the service provider. You can take it to the completely highly resilient kind of infrastructure that we just discussed, where there are components of this application security, where the final termination would be on-premise appliances that would terminate your encrypted traffic, hold the certificates, everything within the customer boundary and domain. And yet the service provider can add value to this, because we would still look at the TLS layer, anything pre-encryption, and other sorts of protections that are afforded. By the way, all of this combines with that tier 0, which is the network DDoS, right? So if this particular application security observes some malicious IP addresses, they can be pushed out to the edge, where you don't need to examine the application layer. It's a bad IP address. You can block it right at the edge. So I think there's a lot of technical as well as obviously the business benefits to such a solution. The key being, even from a false positive, I believe we are coming out with something very innovative. I can't talk too much about it, but it will be able to self-tune. It will be able to detect what are false positives and reduce the false positive rate. Again, I say reduce because look, I would be lying if I said I made your false positive 0. No, but right. It will minimize tremendously, because currently I think there's about roughly these false positives are the reason most enterprises as well as service even if they were to provide these application security services, do not enable a mitigation or protection action. Rather, they stay in a monitoring mode. Unfortunately, here's the stuff. It doesn't help me much to know that the horse is bolted, right? I would rather prevent the horse from bolting from the barn. And that's what we are enabling them by taking away that factor, which has led to those kind of implementations.
Yeah, it's a great explanation. I mean, and you've touched on this a little bit earlier, but I mean, how does a service provider go to market with this? I mean, could you kind of unpack how they can provide the solution and actually articulate it to their tenants?
Absolutely. I think this is as we grow or move along the layers, things do get more advanced, complex, more abstract in terms of what these solutions and benefits are. And I think this is where we come in as experts in this particular field, Mike. and we'll enable our service partners along with marketing packages, along with kind of even from a sales or a retail packages, how you want to package this stuff, help them with a plan in terms of providing tiered services if that's their desire. But we will be a partner with them every step of the way, even though, again, as I mentioned, this thing is designed to, kind of provision, this provisioning scripts and other stuff. So those are all what I call as the physical infrastructure. But I think the main part is we will be the force and the partner behind all the sales activities with their go-to-market strategy, identifying, things that may be more typical within their tenant base, and generating or crafting the necessary marketing materials to help them advance their case, and also clearly delineate and differentiate what this service does and what the benefits to the customers themselves are.
Yeah, totally agree. And we've been doing that today across our other verticals and how we've been going to market as Corero. And certainly that is our message, is to be truly a partner, right? Not just a vendor. So I appreciate you articulating that. So let's take it another step forward. So if I'm a service provider and I'm listening in today, what kind of questions should I be asking, of Corero to qualify us, to help us help them better understand the solution and how it can benefit them?
Right. So, I mean, number one, I would say, in terms of service providers, we talked about carriers and connectivity. There's also a lot of them that provide hosting services. So if you're providing hosting services, have you come across your customer base? I'm sure they already have some sort of application security protection, whether that they're something running local or in the cloud or whatever it is. And that's one area where we can boost the effectiveness of this hosting and create a differentiation. By the way, just providing this kind of a security and application layer, remember the complexity or more advancedness, I don't want to call it complexity because that's what we are reducing. But at the same time, these benefits, these application security benefits, make this particular deal also sticky to the service providers, right? But the thing is, we want to know, number one, how many such customers are there? What are their application security needs? I mean, are they using something else like a Cloudflare or whatever stuff? Are they looking for initiatives to move away? The one big thing that we would offer with our solution, which Cloudflare or any other in the cloud provider does not have, is hybrid architecture. I think this is a very important one. It's been clear. I mean, I've also kind of been posting some articles about trying to repatriate the traffic. I think it is important. I mean, I'm not sure that everything in the cloud, again, depends on your risk strategy. This is more geared towards the enterprise risk strategy. In other words, the tenants to the service provider. So as long as the service provider has a relationship with their tenants, an idea of what those businesses are, I think that would give us quite a bit of information. Now, if their tenants happen to be in BFSI, I can guarantee you this would be an easy sale in terms of, how it would help them, especially the hybrid nature, retaining control and also providing resilience at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, that's the name of the game, right? And I love that you nailed, the hybrid architecture, right? The hybrid nature of the solution, right? Because we are seeing that, and you have been out there evangelizing this message, particularly through your own network. And it's just so important to continue to evangelize this message, just because it underpins the resiliency, right? And you talked about the availability, right? And that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to create a platform that gives these all customers really the resilience that they need to operate in modern businesses where connectivity is a must, right? There is no other way.
Yeah, and more importantly, think about this, right? If you're a service provider, excuse me, and in quite a few instances, there may be a multi-homed service, Now, if we were to provide a in the service provider cloud kind of service, right? I mean, traffic coming through the service provider is protected, but what happens to traffic that may be arriving through a different service provider who doesn't have this service, right?
Yeah.
The hybrid nature, having this second part, even though it belongs, or it could belong, it depends on how we license it, would still be able to protect you even against the other second service provider that may not have this kind of a capability because of the hybrid capability, and not just
Right.
one
And so, I
particular.
mean, it makes sense, right? Because if they're already, because the reason why they would be multi-homed in the first place would be for redundant.
Resilience, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. So it makes sense that they would also have resilience in this protected manner.
Right.
I'm glad you mentioned that. It's a good follow-up.
Yeah, no, I think prior to this whole Cloudflare issue, people may have looked at it like, it's AWS or it's Azure. I guarantee you, any cloud service is going to have issues, and you can't just simply put all of your stuff in a cloud service or a single thing. But I think the hybrid is a good talking point for all the service providers, because I'm sure their tenants are like, Cloudflare melted down. How come, how can we trust that you won't, right? And the answer to that is not, of course, as a service provider, I want to say, hey, look, I run my stuff much better than the other guys. I definitely will say that. But we're actually offering an alternative and saying, hey, Mr. Customer, there's a hybrid option. There's a in your premise component that's not affected, controlled, or anything with us. And you have the capability to operate independent of the service provider network in the event of some sort of such outage. Obviously, when there is no outage, you have this double protection, right? You have the service provider layer that filters out the stuff, and then you have the on-premise component that goes far more granular, much more deeper, decrypts traffic, inspects it, and so on and so forth. So I really think this is something that's this is there is nothing that I can compare it with in terms of the market, where they have an application security hybrid model. Either they have on-premise or they have in the cloud, maybe some sort of a signaling in between, but not a true security policy split, nothing where you can manage separately but yet have a unified view of the whole thing.
Yeah, it's truly innovative. So Raj, as we close out our conversation, how would you like service providers to engage with Corero around this? I mean, you've talked about sort of questions, but what are next steps? Like, what do you see the next steps to kind of break the ice and get the conversation going?
Yeah, I think in terms of engaging with us, obviously, we would be happy even if you just wanted to have a chat or a conversation to see the theoretical possibility. But in a lot of instances, you have customers from various different sectors, and based on what you know of your user or customer base, and the larger there is, clearly this could be very sticky, right, with quite a lot of these customers, and a means to monetize and raise the revenue that you can obtain. But what I think they can engage with us is to understand better how we can deploy what is required of their infrastructure, and go more into I would say the engagement or deployment. Maybe deployment is a strong term, but essentially an architecture discussion as to how they can craft this solution to their particular needs. And they can choose, maybe they don't want to go all the way in, but have some basic protections. That's fine too.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we outline. We always talk about flexible solutions, and we truly are.
Absolutely.
Again, that's part of the partner value that we bring, right? Is because we're not looking just to sell hardware or
Push
just
something.
move
No.
units. Exactly. We're looking to find a solution that's unique and tailored to what they need. So it's a good point. Well, Raj, do you have anything else that you'd like to add or share as we end today?
I would say basically look, we've put out quite a bit of information, and we welcome all queries, and having a chat with you guys, and basically be able to articulate what it is that we can bring of value to you, and help you with your business. So we like to grow, but we want you to grow, and that's how your growth in revenue will generate revenue for us. This is the model we like. It's not a build it and they will come kind of approach. So I think that's one of the key things. It's a true
it's true.
partnership.
That's true. It's tried and true. We've done this with the on the DDoS side with the protection as a service. It's been very effective, and we know the providers really love that model. And there's we believe there's a lot of potential, and so we believe in the art of the possible. So I would encourage anybody watching today to reach out to us. You can go to Corero.com and click on the Speak with a Specialist. Raj or somebody else from my team would be happy to talk to you about any sort of potential opportunities we could explore together. And again, it's a true partnership. That's the way we look at it. So we want you to bring your questions and let's go through it. But we want to thank everybody for tuning in for the 3-part series. It's been really great talking with you, Raj, and I appreciate the time together, and we look forward to next time.
Absolutely. And even though this series ends, there's plenty of topics that can be discussed, and we intend on continuing these kind of series on various different topics, and based on the interest that we see from all of our audience here, we can even craft those things to more specific areas or maybe other areas. But by the way, beyond the products that we sell and all, we'll also be glad to kind of help understand the overall security landscape, and if there are areas where we can impart our guidance, we will.
Yeah, that's right. It's all about listening to the pain points and seeing how we can fit and solve the problem.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Right. Well said. All right, everybody. Thank you again, and until next time, we hope everybody takes care, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yep. Thank you all, and take care. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.